got the Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, here with us. Deputy Prime Minister, thank you very much for being with us and good morning to you. We've heard from Sally there in Dubai, we heard from Cordy in Tel Aviv. The war continues. What's the British government's assessment of when this war will come to an end?
Sadly, this may run for a number of days yet, and we're very conscious that for the British people with loved ones in the area, and some will have family in the armed services, this is a very, very stressful time, never mind the effect on a cost of living crisis. So our number one priority is to support British nationals in the region and to get them out safely over the coming weeks. And of course, to support our allies who are under rocket fire at this time, and to ensure that British lives are saved and people feel safe.
Deputy Prime Minister, you said days yet, you said you'll get them out in a number of weeks. People will be confused by the messaging there. What is your thought as to how long this will go on for? We've heard from the Americans, they think it could go on for at least 8 weeks, if not longer.
Well, in the end, the war aims are for the Americans and the Israelis who begun this offensive action that we, of course, are not part of. Our response is defensive action and to support our allies and British soldiers and people across the region. So the war aims must, in the end, be directed to them. But what I would say is this, that we recognise that this is a stressful time, and I think that the context is more febrile because what we are seeing is drone activity, this new warfare, where clearly a lot has been learned by Ukraine and that particular theatre of war. And that's why it's important that we have marshalled and pre-deployed F-35s, more Tycoons to the area, radar equipment, HMS Dragon is en route to the area, all of that to ensure that we're keeping our people safe and supporting our allies.
Those in the region say they feel abandoned, saying they're not getting the support that they need. We're going to speak to someone later on in the programme who's in Tel Aviv who feels like he hasn't been contacted by the government. Why is there this sort of seemingly slow response to help people in the region?
Well, look, let's be clear. It will not just be the UK. I think in your item, the French and others have people in the region that would like to get home. Mm-hmm. The first thing is to register your interest, and having been Foreign Secretary, this is a huge evacuation exercise, much bigger, say, than Afghanistan. We've got people right across the region. It is dependent on the ability to travel safely and airspace being opened, and you will recognise that there are many planes that are not able to fly when there are missiles effectively in the sky. But I am pleased that 6,500 people have made their way out of UAE. I'm pleased that that charter flight did leave Oman, and it was good to hear people thanking the FCDO staff on the ground. We've got rapid deployment teams on the ground across the region, and we will do everything we can with both charter flight and those commercial flights where airspace does open up and people are able to get out and planes are able to get out, to get our people out over the coming days.
We're going to move on to some of the military preparedness for this. We heard from the Prime Minister yesterday saying that assets were sent to the region ahead. You know that there is criticism that we weren't prepared enough. It's going to take a week for Dragon to get there. On the repatriation of British citizens, why wasn't there planning in place for that? If you knew that something was likely like this, I mean, the Poles told their citizens to get out of the region a couple of weeks ago. Why wasn't there more planning in place to make sure that our Brits were ready to get out?
I don't think that's correct. We were redeploying into the region from January and February of this year. That's why the radar is there. There are 400.
I'm talking about citizens. Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, there are 400 personnel just on air defences in the region. That's why the radar equipment's there. That's why the F-35s are there. That's why the Typhoons are there. And in terms of our travel advice, it's constantly updated. It's been constantly updated through February and into this month. I think all of us could see the concerns that were being raised around Iran earlier in the year, and our advice was predicated on that, and people obviously make their assessment based on that travel assessment.
HMS Dragon is going to take a week to get there, we think. We've had reporters in Cyprus, speaking to military officials there, military personnel, who say that they're kind of embarrassed at the state of what it seems the British response to this is, late and perhaps not adequate. Are you in any way embarrassed by the UK response? The military personnel are.
Look, absolutely not. We have
But why is the ship taking so long to get there, Deputy Prime Minister?
We have F-35s, Typhoons in the sky, taking down missiles as we speak. And that has happened over Jordan, it's happened over Qatar, and of course we will support nationals in the region. It's also right to say that we coordinate with allies. The French, the Germans, Cyprus is a NATO ally, so we coordinate also with other teams and other close allies on how we equip the area. And as I say, HMS Dragon will be in the region in the coming weeks to further bolster and further support our air defence.
Is it also right to say, though, that allies in the region feel a bit left down? We heard from the Consul General of Cyprus saying that he wanted more to be done. We're going to speak to the Foreign Minister, Foreign Affairs Chief later. The UAE have been disappointed with some of the UK response as well.
I recognise that if you are in Cyprus, if you are in Bahrain, if you are in UAE, with missiles flying around, with drones able to intercept airspace, of course this is febrile, of course this is tense, of course this is stressful. I recognise that.
Have we let our allies down in the regions? I'm asking you, Deputy Prime Minister.
In the calls that I have had over the last days, the Foreign Secretary, that is not the assessment that we're making. In fact, they are grateful for the further support that we are giving.
A couple more points on British decisions. It's reported that Cabinet was divided about allowing the US to use our bases. Is that right? Is that reporting correct, that the Cabinet was divided over whether we should do that?
I don't recognise those reports. And I have to say, I think it is a travesty that anyone should report from a National Security Council.
You're talking about the leaks here?
Because, of course, it puts British lives at risk. And I hope that that is properly investigated.
OK, investigation, you hope. We'll see if that comes. Let's move on to the American part of all of this. The Iranian Red Crescent reports some 1,200 people have been killed in strikes. I want to talk specifically about one strike on the first day of the war, strike on a school. It's reported today that Reuters think the Americans may have been responsible for that. Earlier in the week, the US Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt suggested it was Iranian propaganda. Have the UK assessed what happened on that school in Minab on Saturday?
I'm not aware of any assessment, and that must be right for the US to comment if it's their military personnel that have been involved, but I will leave that for the US.
You recognise, though, that if it was targeted, a school was targeted, that would constitute a breach of international law?
This is a febrile war zone. And
that doesn't excuse hitting schools, does it, Deputy Prime Minister?
Well, I don't know the veracity of that statement, and I haven't seen the intelligence, but it is absolutely for the Americans to comment on what has happened there.
OK, well, they are investigating it. Look, you're a friend of the Vice President, J.D. Vance, aren't you? Have you spoken to him since this war broken out?
I haven't spoken to him. I have been in touch, but I haven't spoken to him since the war broken out.
We've only heard from him in the past few days. He was against US intervention in foreign wars, wasn't he? Will he be slightly disappointed this is happening? What's the sense that you're getting?
Well, what I have spoken to him about is the diplomatic attempts to get Iran to forego their uranium enrichment and their desire to have a nuclear weapon. And obviously I was engaged in some of those intensive talks last year. The diplomacy, I think, is the right route. Let's get back to diplomacy. And that has always been our assessment. But it is also the case that there has been a belligerence in the IRGC and the Iranian regime, to be frank and honest about their nuclear capability and deep concern about their ballistic capability.
Donald Trump said overnight that he wants to be personally involved in choosing the next leader. Is that a good idea?
Well, I mean, I think the challenge has always been that whilst al-Hamani may have gone, there are others who are pretty hardline or could be worse. In the end, this will be for the Iranian people themselves when this intense period is over, unless there's any suggestion of putting boots on the ground, and I haven't heard that at this stage.
A couple more topics, if you indulge me, Deputy Prime Minister. The second reading of the Courts and Tribunal Bill is due next week. It's expected there will be a rebellion. Some 60 of your MPs have already said they will oppose it. How are you going to persuade them to back your plans?
Well, look, I do expect that the Courts Bill will go through at second reading, and it's because it's the right thing to do. And as I've been speaking to Labour MPs, but MPs from across the House, they recognise that victims of crime are waiting too long for justice. We've got to deal with that with more money, and we are. We've got to deal with that with modernisation, and we are. And we need reform. And that's why we're making this threshold change to jury trials so that we can protect jury trials for the very serious cases that require it. But if you steal an iPhone, you will get a single judge or a magistrate.
I mean, many in the Bar Council don't think that it will reduce the backlog, do they? And many of your sort of other colleagues don't think either, led by Carl Turner.
Well, I was pleased that the Bar Council welcomed the deal that I've got for more money for our courts and more sitting days, and welcome our response to Sir Brian Levison's Part 2 review. Yes, of course, the Bar Council have made its views known about the threshold change to jury trials. We will have that debate and discussion as this legislation passes through the House of Commons and the House of Lords.
Forgiveness on this, not permission. One final question on facial recognition technology. We've heard this week another individual, Alvi Chowdhury, has been wrongly identified because of the use of retrospective facial recognition technology. There are concerns that the technology has a bias. It's been rolled out across forces all over the country, 43 forces, and live recognition cameras are being used in 13 forces. Is this technology safe, and will you continue its use?
Well, my assessment is it's safe in the vast majority of cases, and where it does go wrong, it must be properly investigated, and of course, any damage must be repaired.
Okay. Deputy Prime Minister, very short answer on that final question, but thank you very much
Thank
for being
you.
with us. Thank you.